later on. Okay, can you hear me okay? I'm sorry, I'm sitting in my kitchen and the washing machine is running. I'm doing laundry at the same time, so I don't know if you can hear my washing machine, but it's literally right there. So
I personally can't hear the washing machine, and you
okay.
sound perfect.
Okay,
So.
good. Oh, good. I was really worried. I turned the dryer off because the dryer is super loud. So I turned the dryer off, but the washing machine's still running. So, three kids. It literally never stops. The laundry is always going. It's ridiculous. Okay, so let's get started. I'm gonna start with the Industrial Revolution. Your last chapter started with the Industrial Revolution, or the one from last week or whatever. I've started talking about changes to the economy and some of the inventions that helped spur the new market revolution in America about this time. I'm going to start there because it kind of builds up to really dividing the North and the South. This plays a huge part in the division and the differences between the North and the South that contribute directly to the Civil War. So I'm going to kind of start there and kind of build up to it. So, okay. The Industrial Revolution in America actually starts in England. It starts in about 1790-ish in England and makes its way over to the United States. By 1870, so right at the end of the Civil War, the United States makes more textiles, which is cloth, basically. We make more textile than England. That's huge because England is the #1 exporter and maker of textile up until then. And then by 1914, by World War I, we are literally the world's largest industrial economy. We're not anymore. We're not anymore. But for a minute there, we were the world's largest industrial economy. So how do we get from literally making nothing, literally almost nothing, to the world's largest economy? One, new materials. Specifically, we're talking new chemicals that are invented and new natural resources that we figure out how to use better. I don't know if that's the right word. We figure out how to make iron. Iron is a huge one. We start using iron instead of steel. And so, I'm sorry, we start using steel instead of iron. I'm so sorry, that's backwards. I have them in my head backwards. Steel is lighter, harder, more durable. We can make better buildings out of it. We can make better railroads out of it. That plays a huge part in the rise of the railroads. Better buildings means better living situations. So we can start making apartments. It's the first time we can actually build like 2-3 level homes. That's a big deal because you got a lot of people crammed into a tiny little city and nowhere to go. So then when we figure out we can start stacking people on top of each other, that changes the game. So better building. So by 1900, 95% of all commercial buildings are built using steel. And do you know where we get the steel? Do you know who makes the steel? What city?
Pittsburgh.
Who figures this out? I'm sorry, what?
Pittsburgh.
Yes, Pittsburgh. That's why they're the Steelers, because that's really where we get all of our steel from for the most part. So huge industrial revolution happening in the North, thanks to steel, a lot of it. Okay, we also get new inventions. Your book also talked about this in the last chapter, but okay, things like the steam engine, and then we got a lot of stuff that relates to textile making, because that's a big business for us for a while. Textile making, things like the flying shuttle, the spinning jenny, the water frame, and the power loom. All of those things help industrialize the making of textiles so that people don't have to do those jobs. Now they become more automatic and mechanized. I couldn't think of how to say that word. I'm sorry. Mechanized. That's how you say it. Okay. Bigger, better factories leads to more products being made. The thing is, more products being made, they're also being made identically. So instead of things being made by hand, there's a slight variation when you make something by hand with each one. But when you make something on a machine, they're more standardized. And you can make more faster and usually cheaper. So that's a huge boom to the American economy. Okay. I think that your book talked about the Lowell Mill Girls. So we started building a bunch of mills, specifically near water. So they're water powered mills. They turn the big, water wheel, and that provides the power. So we get that. We have a lot of changes to specific areas of our economy. So here's just a few. Ready? One, agriculture. Agriculture benefits tremendously from the Industrial Revolution. Your book talks about the John Deere singing plow. I don't know why, whatever. It cuts through the ground so fast that it's like it's singing. I don't know what that means, but that's what they called it, the singing plow, because it went so fast. It was like it was singing along. Maybe that was an old-timey saying that is just not around anymore, but I don't know what that means. But that's what they called it, the singing plow. So that was a John Deere invention. Actually, he didn't invent it, he borrowed it and improved upon it. So, but John Deere was a real dude. It's not just not just the green and yellow thing and this, the symbol and I know there's a song, right? John Deere Green. That's a real song. Yeah, it's not just used for country songs. He was a real person and he invented and improved upon a lot of agricultural products. So he was only making a couple of those a year when he first started out. Only, I don't know, less than 50. It's a great song. I don't remember it. I just know that I know of it, but I don't remember the words. I'll look it up later. I do know that she thinks my tractor's sexy though. I know that one. I don't know why I know that one, but I know that one. Ugh, okay. Born and raised in Nashville. You can't escape it, I don't think. Okay, so but by 1840, he's making 100 a year. So he's selling these things out. They sell like gangbusters, doing very well for himself. We also get improvements in things like, well, I think your book talks about the cotton gin, right? Eli Whitney's invention of the cotton gin. It basically just removes the seeds from the cotton flower part that you pick out of what's that thing called? The husk part? You pick the cotton out of it, and then there's seeds all inside of it. So before you'd have to pick out all the seeds by hand. Now with the cotton gin, it just like combs them against two combs like that, and it pulls the seeds out. So he's trying to help by making something supposedly that's going to help people who are growing and picking cotton. The other thing is, hey, come on. I do listen to country music, but don't make fun of me for knowing the words to that song. I know y'all know the words to that song too. Stop it. Okay, so, but the thing is, with the invention of the cotton gin, before the cotton gin is invented, an adult slave was expected to pick and clean about a pound of cotton a day. After the cotton gin, though, they're expected to pick and clean roughly 50 pounds of cotton a day. So the amount of work goes up exponentially for the African Americans who are actually picking and cleaning that cotton. That's not his original intention, but that's basically what happens. In 1790, the South produced roughly 3,000 bales of cotton a day, which a bale equals roughly about 500 pounds of cotton. So that's a lot of cotton. Think about that. 500 pounds per bale, we're making 3,000 a year estimate. By 1810, though, we are producing 180,000 bales of cotton a day. That's a huge jump. And by By 1815, we were up to 335,000 bales of cotton per day. So it's a huge increase. Okay. What else gets improved? The other thing that gets improved is transportation. Your book talks a lot about canals. They talk about bridges, canals, and railroads specifically. It is a central, very central, important part of our economy, transportation, because you have to move the product from where it is produced to where people will buy it. So you have to move it to the market, essentially, whether it's food, whether it's handmade goods, whatever it is. It has to be taken to where people will buy it. So transportation is a huge part of the economy. In fact, most of our goods that we buy nowadays are still transported on trains. A lot of it, most of it, I would. We get 18 wheelers and trains essentially transport most of the stuff that we buy and use every day. So transportation plays a huge part here. So we get a major building of network of roads and canals linking major cities, starting really along the eastern seaboard. That's where we kind of start. First, we have the National Road, right? The first federally funded United States road in American history. It starts from Cumberland, Maryland, goes to Wheeling, West Virginia, and eventually ends in Columbus, Ohio. So roughly about 620 miles. So it's huge. Before that, we would use wagons to transport stuff. And you take a wagon on a dirt road, that's going to take you a minute to get wherever you're going. But you have this fancy paved road, you can get there faster. So it dramatically cuts travel time. From New York to Boston in 1800 took roughly 4 days. In 1824, after they build the road, it only takes a day and a half. You can get there a lot faster. The other thing we get is the steam engine, right? We talk, yeah, what's his name? James Watt invents the steam engine. So we get the invention of steamboats. So we've always used the rivers to transport goods, but now we can do it so much quicker. Going downriver, not so much a problem. Going upriver, though, is when you have trouble because you're fighting against the current. So it's going to take you at least twice as long to get back. So another statistic. I write all these things down. I don't know why. Okay. So from New Orleans to Louisville. Okay. So if you go from Louisville to New Orleans, it's taking you roughly, what do I have written down here? It's taking you roughly 3 to 4 months to get there. With the steamboat, it takes you about a week. So it really cuts down on travel time. That is huge for port cities like St. Louis, New Orleans, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Louisville. They benefit dramatically from the steamboat and from being able to transport those goods super fast. Big for them. The other thing was canals. We start, literally it's called canal fever. But we started building a whole bunch of canals. To try to connect all these waterways to each other so we can use those steamboats and get goods to other people. Canals are cheaper to build than roads because you basically just have to dig out a tunnel and fill it with water. Not really a big deal. They didn't have to be really deep and they didn't have to be reinforced even in the beginning because the boats were so small. And I know that there's been a boat stuck in the Suez Canal now for like a week or something. I don't know. I haven't really been following along, but apparently they got it out today. So finally, the Suez Canal has been unblocked, finally, today. I read that this morning, so congratulations. Okay, in 1817, we had about 100 miles total in the whole country of canals. However, the governor of New York at the time realizes canals could be huge for transportation, not just for goods and services, but also for people. People could get there faster. So he petitions the New York legislature for money to build a really big, good canal. He convinces them that it would be worth it. So they do. They build the Erie Canal. And it links Buffalo, New York, which is on Lake Erie, right? Erie Canal, Lake Erie. It links Buffalo to Albany on the Hudson River. So originally they built this thing. It is 363 miles long, which is the biggest canal we've ever built. They spent roughly $7 million in 1817 money building the Erie Canal. However, it's a huge success because it charged people to use it. So you have to pay money to use the canal. They make their money back pretty quick because people realize totally worth it because you can get your stuff and yourself to and from places so much faster that it's worth it. It sparks canal fever after the Erie Canal is such a success. And we build roughly 3,300 miles of canals in the next 20 years, all over the South, Northeast, to connect waterways. Okay, the other transportation one was railroads. Your book goes into a little bit of detail about railroads. I don't really like to spend a lot of time on railroads. I mean, they're interesting, it's fascinating, but you know the gist. 1825, the first commercial railway is in England. And we realize, oh, that's another really good way to get stuff to and from really fast. So we bring that over here. We start developing them in America. A trip from New York to Boston now only takes about half a day if you take the train. Here's a fun fact. When railroads first started, they didn't want women to ride railroads. They thought, we've come a long way, baby. They thought that if women rode on railroads, that the speed and the bumpy of the railroad would mess up our internal organs and that it would like really hurt us. It would be really bad for us. And so originally they weren't sure about letting women ride railroads. So
like we're saying like a bad organ transplant or something.
I don't know where they get these things. You know what? This always fascinates me. How
were they high or something?
you know what? This is a different time. But it always fascinates me when I learn this information about how weak people used to think women were, like we can't handle stuff, like we don't have babies, like we don't survive stuff, lots of pain and stuff every single month, like for 50 years. Ridiculous. Anyway, I digress. Okay.
I actually heard that part of the train thing was that it would kill the baby that they were carrying if they got on the train.
But they're letting pregnant ladies work in the field, like, you know, all these African American women who are picking cotton in fields, literally having babies in a field and then right back to work. I mean, so, you know, ridiculous. Okay. I have something else to say about that, but I'm just going to keep moving on. Yes, Marina, yes.
I hate to say this, but at that time also, sadly, again, just because of that time, I do not believe this, but African American pregnant ladies were not viewed as actual people.
That's exactly
so
right.
they kind of
That's
didn't care.
That's why. That's exactly right. Yeah, that's why. Yes, that's the whole thing. Yeah. A lot of slave owners actually preferred that they really liked the fact that their slaves would get pregnant and have babies. And some of them would actually pull them out of the fields so that they could have babies because that meant another slave. You know, okay. We'll get there. We'll talk about that later. It's the worst. Railroads. I think I was talking about railroads. Okay, so they figured out ladies could safely ride a railroad at some point. They figured out it's not going to kill us, pull our organs out of our bodies. So the first commercial railroad in the United States is 1835. Some people thought it was this amazing marvel. Other people thought it was way too dangerous and unnecessary risk to take. The Transcontinental Railroad, which goes from one side of the country to the other, is finished in 1869. If you have ever seen, I don't know if you have, because y'all are so young and I'm so old, but there is a movie called Wild Wild West with Will Smith and Kevin Kline. And that movie, the very end of the movie, takes place in Promontory Point, Utah, because what they're doing is joining the two railroads and connecting them to make the first transcontinental railroad. It's a big part of the end of the movie. I don't know. But this is a fun little fact. The thing was, when they joined the railroads, I love this story. When they joined the railroads, everybody celebrated. It was great. They nailed in a gold spike, a solid gold spike, into the track, to connect the railroads or whatever. They immediately pull it out, just in case anybody steals it. So they immediately pull it out, and it's in a museum. But everybody was celebrating so hard, everybody was so excited, and they were so drunk that they couldn't find anybody to actually drive the train across the track, like the connected track. So they had to wait like 2-3 hours until somebody was sober enough to actually drive a train across the connected track. Fun. They knew how to party back then, no doubt. Okay. The other thing that gets revolutionized, I guess is the word. Okay, communications. We have a huge boost in communication ability. First, we get the telegraph, right? That used electricity to send coded messages. We get the invention of Morse code. Samuel Morse was actually a painter. He painted portraits. If you go to, there's a museum in Chattanooga, and they have a whole bunch of his paintings. He was decent. He was a very good painter. However, he invented an alphabet in coded, the coded Morse code alphabet. A series of dots and dashes. Each dot and dash is a letter, right? Y'all know this. And I'm sure that you've seen this in movies, the SOS, right? Y'all know how to do SOS? Okay, all right, then I won't do it. But yeah, so he invents that. That starts the rise of Western Union. Western Union telegraph offices, stations set up all over the country to get and send and receive messages. You could now talk to somebody in 300, 400 miles away almost instantly. That's huge. That is a huge game changer. So communication improves. We also get improvements in things like there's a couple things I was about to say. One, gun manufacturing. We are now able to mechanize gun making, which means that the parts of the gun are now made on machines, and it makes them much more reliable, much more standardized, and much more accurate. Instead of being handmade, they're made on machines, which makes them way more accurate. The other thing is we get new kinds of bullets. Before this, the bullets were all round. They were shaped like little round cannonballs, basically, little metal cannonballs. But when we changed the way that guns are made, we also changed the way bullets are made. So now we realize if you put a cone on the end of a bullet, if you shape the end of the bullet into, like a point like this, when it shoots out of the gun, when it flies out of the gun, it spins, it rotates, decreases the drag, wind resistance. It can go further and it can go faster, which makes them incredibly more accurate and deadly.
It makes the Civil War a bloodbath.
That's exactly right, which means the Civil War is incredibly deadly because we have way better guns, way better bullets. I don't know if better is the right word there. Sorry, but whatever. I don't know. That's sort of your opinion. If you think they're better or not.
In relation to what it was before.
That's exactly right. Yeah. The Civil War is the bloodiest war in American history, mainly because we have better guns and better bullets, and we have really terrible medical care. We just, if somebody had a bullet in an arm and they couldn't get it out, then they just cut the arm off, essentially. You know what I mean? So the medical care was not great. From that point on, medicine gets better. So now, we go to war now. We have such amazing advancements in medical technology that most people who are hurt in a battle don't die. We can save their lives. So yes, the Civil War is incredibly deadly because better guns, better bullets, terrible healthcare. They really don't know what they're doing. Lots of infection, lots of amputations that get infected, lots of disease. It's bad. Okay. The other thing that we improve is printing. Improvements in the way things are printed also leads to cheaper printing and a lot more books being available. Not just books, but also things like newspapers and magazines and all those sorts of things. We get the invention of magazines aimed specifically at targeted groups of people. So I know nowadays, I don't know if anybody actually reads magazines anymore. Does anybody read magazines anymore?
Nope.
No. I used to have a subscription to Better Homes and Gardens. I don't know. I'm a Southern lady. I used to have a subscription to Better Homes and Gardens. But I haven't had that in probably 10 years. It's been a long time, I think, since I've actually read a magazine. But they didn't have the internet. So they had magazines. We get roughly, where are we at here? Oh, newspapers, 200 newspapers in 1800. By 1830, we've got 1,200 newspapers across the country. Huge influx. Magazines aimed at specific audience. One, Farmer's Almanac. That thing's still getting printed. They still print that thing, and you can buy it in the Walmart checkout line there. You can get the Farmer's Almanac. But also the first ever ladies magazine. It's called Godey's Ladies Book, the first ever ladies magazine. And it would publish things about fashion, literature, recipes, how to raise your kids, that sort of stuff, standard lady stuff, okay. So there's that. What else are we doing here? Okay, so let's talk about the factory system. The Lowell Mill Girl factory system. I know y'all read about that already, right? The mill girls, they're treated like absolute garbage. They get paid nothing for doing 14 hours of work, 6 days a week. It's insane. They live at the mill, basically. They have housing there, so they live there. At one point, they figure out it's not great, and they go on strike. It's the first really big organized labor strike in the United States. So they go on strike. It doesn't quite work out for them in the beginning, but then later on it catches on as a real form of fighting against, what's the word I'm trying to say here? Overzealous capitalism, maybe? I don't know if that's the way to put it. Workers being taken advantage of. They figure out that striking is a very effective tool in fighting against that. And it starts a really big labor movement in the United States as well. Okay, so all of that. We get urban industrialization, meaning changes to cities. It's different than rural urbanization, rural industrialization. Whew, that's a lot. That's a lot. So big cities like Philadelphia, New York, start building huge factories. They invest a lot of money in building big factories. The South, they use their money to invest in, oh my God, somebody just dropped something upstairs and that scared the pee out of me. I'm sorry. I hope a child is okay. I don't know. There's no scream, so we'll see. But the South invests money in things like agriculture, specifically, right? That's where all the money comes from in the South, is mainly agriculture. So that's where they're putting their investment into. The North, however, invests in factory, industrialization, that sort of thing. That becomes a huge difference in the Civil War because the North is able to change those factories into gun manufacturing, bullet manufacturing, shoes, uniforms, whatever they needed. The South didn't have any really big factories like that, so we didn't really have anything like that. So huge impact on the outcome of the Civil War. So, okay, where are we getting to? What? Oh, your book talks a lot about free labor, the free labor movement. That doesn't, and it's very quick to point out, free labor does not mean that you're not getting paid for your labor. It means that whoever is doing the job is free. So non-slave labor, essentially, is what that is. I mean, they're paid, but not well. However, they're paid. And so most of the industry that happens throughout this, 1800, right up to the Civil War, is free labor. They are mainly immigrants. And out of those immigrants, it's mainly the Irish. And then right after the big influx of Irish come in, we have a huge influx of Chinese come in. And so those people, the Chinese and the Irish, really do the majority of the labor when we're talking about building railroads, building factories, essentially building up towns around where railroads come through. You get a lot of Irish immigrants and Chinese immigrants who basically establish huge towns where railroads come through. So we end up with cities like San Francisco. San Francisco has a huge Asian American population because in the beginning, when the Chinese immigrants were coming into this country for jobs, for opportunity, they settled there and they essentially built up the town of San Francisco from the ground up in the beginning when they were building the railroads there. Plus it's a port city, so they would just come in, stay there. Okay, so what else do we have to talk about? Okay, so basically what this all leads up to is that the North and the South are incredibly economically divided. And even the South itself, you have the upper South and the lower South. Even the upper South and lower South become economically divided. The closer you are to the North, probably the better off economically you are, essentially. The upper South, we've got slave states, but the land is not really suited in the upper South for growing cotton. So you're growing things like grain, corn, rye, hemp, and livestock. That's mainly what you're doing in the upper South there. So states like Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Arkansas, those. You got a mixture of plantations and small family farms, basically is the makeup of the upper South. We don't really need a lot of slaves. They do use slave labor, obviously, for those farms, but we're not like huge plantation slave owners, basically. We work, if there's industry in those states, then it's stuff like tanning, like, making leather, iron making, milling flour, cutting down trees, timber stuff, sugar refinery. That's what your reading is about this week, is the history of sugar in the United States. Yeah, okay. And then you have the lower South, which is states like South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Louisiana, and even Texas a little bit at some point. We're getting all the way over into Texas at this point. So from Alabama to Texas in the United States, that area of the United States is called the Black Belt of the United States because the dirt, the soil in that particular region right there along the South is so good. It's so rich and it's so dark that it's black. So we call this the Black Belt of the United States, and it is perfect for growing all kinds of stuff, but specifically cotton. So that's where most of our cotton is grown. The thing is, cotton is really hard on the soil. It drains the soil of a lot of nutrients. So you have to rotate your crops when you grow cotton, or move your field, all of it over to someplace new. Those lower southern states grow more and more reliant on slave labor all the way up to the Civil War. 90% of the slave labor in the United States is in the lower South before the Civil War in those states. They are growing cotton mostly. That is really what they're focused on here. Okay. I'm going to skip this and we're going to move on. Okay. So let's talk. Your book talks about the Second Great Awakening. So I'm just going to do that real fast. And the Mormons, we're going to talk a little bit about Mormons. Before I do that, are any of you Mormon? Let me just ask really fast. I always ask before I teach Mormonism because I seriously do not want to get anything wrong and I don't want to offend anybody. So is anybody Mormon? Raise your hand. Let me know. I don't want to upset anybody. Okay, cool. Okay, here we go then. Okay, so let's talk. Wait, let me get to it. The Second Great Awakening. Okay, so about this time in the United States, all this change is happening. Everything's going on. We have a huge religious influx in the United States, and we call it the Second Great Awakening. Mainly a lot of Protestantism, lots of new churches, lots of new denominations, but we also have a huge influx of Jewish immigrants coming in specifically to the Northeast, so New York, that area, and Catholics, because the Irish are mostly Catholic. So we get a lot of Catholics. We also have a lot of Quakers still in the North. So all of these people have this huge religious revival, essentially, is what's happening here. Okay. It starts in, we say, the Second Great Awakening starts in Kentucky. It starts in Cane Ridge, Kentucky, but it spreads quickly across the South and then the North up into New England. Basically, what these preachers are doing, or they're using tactics that the Baptists have been using forever. What they're doing is, one, speaking very plainly, none of this thee, thou stuff, very plainly so that everybody can get the message. Two, a lot of powerful imagery. So when they are describing things from the Bible, they're very descriptive about it. And then three, they're holding a lot of mass meetings, a lot of big tent revivals, a lot of, Sunday dinner on the ground sort of situations. I don't know if y'all are ever raised in that, but we have those a lot. Okay, the thing is, there's a huge growth in African-American Protestantism at this time too. 20% of all the Baptists and Methodists in the South are African-American. They start their own churches. And to be honest, think about it. To be honest, there's still a separation between African-American churches and white churches still, especially here in the South. I don't know. It's just a thing. They start their own churches and they break off from each other. And maybe nowadays they're a little more integrated, but for a very long time, you had Black church and you had white church. Different. You go to your church. So the thing is, we are basically, what these people are trying to do is they're fighting against the ideas of materialism, because the Industrial Revolution has allowed people to buy a lot more stuff, right? Because all this stuff is being made quicker and cheaper. So a lot of people start buying more stuff. We actually get the invention of credit, where you can buy stuff on credit and pay later. Thank God for credit cards, right? I think everybody's got one now, but that happens now during the Industrial Revolution so that more people can buy more stuff. America is definitely a, buy kind of culture. So what they're preaching against, these guys during the Second Great Awakening, is they're preaching against materialism. By 1800, there's about 50 Methodists church in America, but by the 1860s, we got over 20,000 churches in America. More people than at any point ever in the history of America are attending a church service, some kind of church. Okay, so let's talk Second Great Awakening. One of the really big preachers of this time, the most famous preacher that comes out of the Second Great Awakening, his name's Charles Finney. He's a lawyer who turned into a preacher, who became a preacher. He's very widely known during the Second Great Awakening. And this is his quote. Oh God, I didn't come up with this. This is his quote, okay? He had a religious experience one day, and from then on, he says he is, quote, on retainer for the Lord Jesus Christ. Get it? Because he's a lawyer. Okay, there you go. His thing is, he stresses free will. You have the ability to determine what happens to you, right? You can choose to follow Jesus and live your afterlife in heaven with Jesus, or you can choose not to. That's your choice. God gave you that free will. Use it wisely. That's basically his whole message. He also preaches the idea of something called perfectionism and bringing about the new millennium. And he's not talking about the end of the 100 years. He's talking about the millennium as in bringing Jesus Christ back. That's when Jesus comes back to earth and all that entails. It's in Revelation. You can figure that out. But that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to get Jesus to come back. That's what he wants. That's what he's preaching for. So you're striving for perfectionism so that we can reach the millennium. Jesus comes back. He appeals to a large middle class of people. And then he starts getting to the wealthy people. Then he starts really focusing on the wealthy to bring more money in. So out of this Second Great Awakening, we get a lot of new churches. We also get new religion, Mormonism. Okay, let's talk Mormonism. Okay. So, oh, poop, where'd I put it? Okay. Okay. New church. The Mormons, the name of the religion is actually called Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There used to be a commercial on when I was a kid, and they would have this really nice message. And at the end, it would say, brought to you by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons. So now every time I hear that, that's all I hear in my head, the Mormons. So founded by a man named Joseph Smith. He was born on a farm in New York. He began having visions of God at the age of 15. He says, this is his account, okay? I don't like doing this because I don't want to upset anybody, but here you go. Okay, so he says, in one of his visions, okay, doesn't sound good. In one of his visions, he says he is directed by angels to go dig up gold plates in the woods, in the wilderness. He's got to go dig up these gold plates. And on the gold plates are instructions for redeeming the lost tribes of Israel, meaning all the people, okay? He says he does. He says he goes out into the woods and he finds these gold tablets and he translates them. And that translation of the gold tablets becomes the Book of Mormon. I don't know if you've ever had the kids in the white shirts and the black ties come to your house and knock on your door and try to talk to you about a second testimony of Jesus Christ. Okay, that's the Book of Mormon. They think that the Book of Mormon is a second testament of the second testament of Jesus Christ, because the New Testament is the first testament of Jesus Christ. So now the Book of Mormon is the second testament of Jesus Christ. That's what they think. Okay, and so they have to do that. By the way, it is required by their religion that they do missionary work, and part of their missionary work is going out into the community. and knocking on doors and trying to get people to listen to the Book of Mormon. So take it easy on them, okay? Don't be mean. They're just doing what they have to do. Okay. So when asked to produce these golden tablets, he can't. He says he reburied them in the woods and he doesn't know where. He can't find them now. So nobody ever sees the gold tablets. It's one of the main issues I have here. Okay. As a historian, I need to see the text. I need to see the proof. But he can't. He says, just believe me. An angel told me this is what was revealed to me. Here you go. Okay. So he builds an entire church around this Book of Mormon, the Second Testament of Jesus. He establishes a city in Illinois in 1835, the Mormons do, and he recruits followers. The thing is about the Mormons in the beginning, they are not concerned about where you're from. They don't care what religion you are. They don't care what race you are. Anyone is welcome in the Mormon faith in the very beginning, okay? So African Americans and white people both come to this city in Illinois. This makes the locals very unhappy that he is allowing both Black people and white people to be members of the same church, that they live and they pray together. So he also says at this time that he has a revelation about polygamy. You know what polygamy is? You know what that is?
No.
Has anybody ever seen Sister Wives?
Oh yeah.
Okay, there you go. So that's basically what polygamy is. One man can have multiple wives. He says that it is revealed to him that that's okay because God commands us to go forth and multiply. And that means having as many children as possible. You can't do that with just one wife. So you're allowed to have more than one wife. This also does not sit well with the people in Illinois. They don't like that either. So they arrest him. They arrest Joseph Smith. They put him in jail. While in jail, he and his brother both are in jail. They're lynched by a mob in the town. They're hanged in their cell. And so June of 1844, Joseph Smith and his brother are killed. Now who's going to take over the church? Okay, the guy steps up. Brigham Young is the next man who takes over the Mormon church. You probably know that name because there's a university in Utah, right? Brigham Young University, huge, good school, fantastic school, super religious Mormon university in Utah. So what Brigham Young does is he takes all of the followers of the Mormon faith of Joseph Smith, he takes all of them and they go on this mass exodus from Illinois all the way to Utah. They settle in Salt Lake City. In 1847, they settle in Utah at this time is still a province. It's not even a state. So they settle in Salt Lake City. It is still the largest Mormon community in the United States. The most Mormons there. Okay, so there's a lot of tenets about the Mormon faith. They are very big on criticizing the rich, universal salvation. They dismissed all Christian denominations as frauds, except for the Mormon faith. They deny the existence of a hell. They say that if God loved us so much, he wouldn't send you to hell. There is no such thing. You go somewhere, but it's definitely not a hell because God wouldn't do that to you. He urged his followers to avoid things like liquor, tobacco, anything hot drinks. I don't know why. And said that the second coming of Jesus was imminent. It is very close at hand. So, Mormons usually, wherever they went along this path, they usually upset the locals wherever they lived because they refused to abide by the local laws of wherever they were. They worshiped, voted, lived, traveled all together all the time. They basically say that they denied the legitimacy of local civil governments and the U.S. Constitution because it didn't fit in with their faith. and they say they should be able to follow their faith, right? Freedom of religion. We should be able to do what we want because that's our faith. They keep moving, right? Finally settle in Utah. So, okay. And that's where they've been ever since. Okay. The practice of plural marriage, like for example, Brigham Young, the guy who moved them to Utah, he had 26 wives. 26. What? Okay, look, this is just an aside. Have you ever known any woman ever to want more than one husband at a time? Think about it. Would you ever want more than one husband at a time? I think this is solely a guy thing. I think it has to be a guy thing. I have never met a woman who would want more than one husband at a time. I don't know. It just seems like a lot. But, whatever. Okay, 26 wives this man had. If you've ever seen Sister Wives, you know how that works. They have a schedule. They set up a schedule. I don't know. I wouldn't be okay with the schedule. I know for sure. I wouldn't be okay with the schedule. But that's their faith. They thought they were doing God's will, right? It's what God told them to do. So that's what they do. There are all kinds of documents. Another side, I'm so sorry. There are all kinds of documentaries about how people have escaped the Mormon faith, how they had to run away. And there's one called the Mormon Mafia, like where they try to keep you in the Mormon religion because they don't want you to leave. And so they try to keep you there, try to run away. They come and get you and bring you back, sort of situation. There's a whole thing. However, okay. In 1850-ish, the Mormons, the old school Mormons, decided to quit practicing polygamy because it was very upsetting to the rest of the community. And Utah wanted to become a state. The United States government would not allow Utah to become a state with the Mormons practicing the religion the way that they did. So they made a deal with the state of Utah that they would not practice polygamy anymore. So there are two groups of Mormons now. There is a new, more liberal. I mean, that's in big quotes because that's not what that means. They're not liberal. They're just more liberal than the original Mormons. So a newer version of the Mormons, and then there are still like real hardcore OG Mormon people in Utah. So they kind of split into two separate groups. Okay, there you go. Oh, I think I covered Mormonism. I didn't mean to offend anybody. I'm not trying to make you feel a certain way about Mormonism. You do your own research. I'm just putting it out there. Okay. Sorry, I hate doing that. Okay. The last thing I want to talk to. No, I don't want to end on that. I don't want to talk about this last. Right. I was gonna have to talk about slave labor, and I didn't really want to talk about that right now. We'll do the next class. Start there. Okay. I'm trying to think where to go next. I may just stop because I don't want to talk about slavery and slave labor as the last thing that we discussed today because that's sad.
Of course it's sad. It's slavery.
I know, and it's awful, and I hate discussing it. I know it's 100% necessary. I understand that. You have to know your history in order to learn from it and benefit from it, not make the same choices in the future. That is one of the reasons I love my job. I just don't enjoy discussing it. You know what I mean? It's like, it's gut-wrenching. One of the least favorite parts of my job. Okay, let's do this. Okay, working conditions for Africans in the South. Most of them work in fields, right? Agricultural economy. So most of the slaves in the South are working in fields. They have other jobs as well. There are, domestic workers, and they're mainly women. right? Maids, nannies, cooks, those sorts of things. But you also have men who have other jobs: carriage drivers, gardeners, couriers, those sorts of things. In the cities, in the northern cities, there is still slavery, some slavery. It's not like the slavery in the South, though, right? We have two very distinct types of slavery happening in the United States. In the North, they have different types of jobs. They use them for public works projects, building things. Yeah. Sanitation, building roads, fixing bridges, cabinet makers, tailors, barbers, tanners, anything that basically would require some kind of apprenticeship, those sorts of things. White Southern culture is very, at this time, white Southern culture is very male centered, right? You ever seen Gone with the Wind? Crap, or any of those old movies, you know. It's very male centered. They are big on reputation and honor. If you are offended by someone of a lesser social standing, you can challenge them to a fight, sometimes a duel. Duels are technically illegal, but they still happen all the time. Or you could hit them with a horse whip, you know, whatever you needed to do to defend your honor as a Southern white man, you basically got away with. So there's a dude, John Wilson. He is the former governor of South Carolina. He publishes a handbook for Southern white men. And it's called The Code of Honor, or the Rules for the Government of Principles and Seconds in Dueling. So he writes a whole book about it for how you can get your honor back. The Northerners have a very different idea about what Southern, cool. A very Southern, they have a different idea about what Southern culture is. And they start really making fun of it. They start building a whole culture themselves about how they feel about Southerners. It just adds, all of these things add to the huge differences that happen before the Civil War between the North and the South. The Northerners feel like slavery is brutal and cruel, and therefore most Southerners are too. That's how they feel about us. And they continue to feel that way all the way through the end of the Civil War. And one of the reasons a lot of people join the Northern Army is to fight against slavery and the ridiculousness of white Southern culture. So, okay. Yeah, I don't really want to talk about the rest of this. I'll save it. We'll talk about it on Wednesday because I don't want to end on this. It's too much. Okay. So don't forget, you have a reading this week about Sugar by Khalil Gibran. He's a famous historian, a good writer, so it should be a decent article. No discussion post this week. Only your quiz. Yes, exactly. I know, because I don't really enjoy grading them. I love reading what you write. I do. I don't like grading them because I feel like, I don't know. It's a teacher thing. Okay, so yeah, so that opens Wednesday. And there are questions about the reading on the quiz. I checked already. So if you guys have any questions or need anything, just email me, let me know. More than happy to do whatever. I'm here. Okay. I think that's all for today. Thank you guys for hanging in there. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.